The chickens were the first warning. One blinked sideways at the sky, flapped once, and disappeared into the hay with a screech. The others followed in a flurry of feathers, leaving behind a silence that didn't belong on this bright, dusty afternoon. A strange hush spread across the prairie fields of Outpost Wren 12, the kind of hush that even the wind won't argue with. Overhead, a second sun shimmered through pale clouds, but its light dimmed, if only slightly, as a triangular shadow drifted over the corn rows. Calla paused in the garden with dirt on her hands and one boot untied. 18 years old, sunburned across the nose, and chewing absently on a piece of straw. She didn't look like the kind of girl who'd ever cause trouble. She looked like the kind who baked peach pies and apologized for her coughs. But her fingers twitched. She glanced toward the barn, where her younger sister Juno, barefoot, wild-haired, and 19 tomorrow, was hammering bent metal into a weather vane that looked suspiciously like a knife and drag. Behind her, on the porch of the weather-beaten cabin, Faye, the eldest at 22, was feeding an old hound scraps of cornbread while reading an ancient earth paperback with no cover. They all looked up at the same time. A ship hovered above the field, humming low and smug, like a predator that hadn't decided what mood it was in yet. Silver and sharp-edged, it bore the sigil of the Galactic Empire of Zalanther, bloated with its own pride. Calla wiped her hands on her apron and tilted her head. "Faye," she called, voice calm. "They're early." Faye closed her book. The ramp lowered with unnecessary drama. It hissed, released a puff of sterilized vapor, and revealed 3 alien figures who clearly thought they were the stars of the universe. Krelthune, the ambassador, was all elbows and cheekbones, with a voice like someone had swallowed a trumpet and refused to admit it. He wore a gilded tunic, translucent boots, and an expression practiced to convey benevolent superiority. At his side hovered Zelvix, a twitchy analyst who carried a datapad like a comfort blanket, and behind them lumbered Quarn, a military attaché with shoulders like a siege engine and one cybernetic eye that whirred even when it didn't need to. Krelthune stepped onto the grass like he was expecting it to curtsy. "Good citizens of Earth," he intoned, "by the authority vested in me by the galactic axis of peace and unity, I welcome you into provisional protective custody. Congratulations. You've been selected." "Selected for what?" Faye asked mildly from the porch. "Galactic assimilation, a cultural uplift protocol." He smiled. "You've been chosen for re-education. A gentle process, I assure you." Juno leaned her elbows on the barn door. "Will there be snacks?" Zelvix blinked. "Snacks. I get fidgety when I don't eat," she said, her smile bright and too sharp. "And if we're being uplifted, I'd like to do it with trail mix in hand." "Snacks," muttered Zelvix, typing frantically. Quarn eyed her with growing suspicion. Faye rose from the porch slowly, brushing crumbs from her skirt. Her tone was soft. "We're just farm girls. Maybe the Empire made a mistake." Krelthune laughed, smooth and confident. "Nonsense. No mistake. This colony is listed. 3 unmated females of breeding age. Rural environment. No planetary defense grid. Your ideal." Calla's brow furrowed. "Breeding." Zelvix leaned in. "Don't take offense, it's statistical. Your bioassets. Terran stock is unusually durable. High pain tolerance. Emotional malleability. Makes for excellent cross-species compatibility." There was a moment of stillness, flat, frozen. Then Faye said lightly, "Oh well, when you put it that way." The ship's interior was cleaner than the outside world had any right to be. The metal glistened. Lights pulsed. But it all smelled faintly of lemon-scented bleach and ego. Juno flopped in a seat and stuck her tongue out at the flickering console. "Does this thing play music?" "No," Quarn barked. Zelvix adjusted his glasses and hissed into his recorder. "Subject is exhibiting behavioral contradictions. Subject appears understimulated." Calla traced a fingertip along the table. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Krelthune smirked. "Yes. We've secured vital Earth assets." "No," she said, still smiling. "You've opened a door." Faye sat cross-legged across from him. Her gaze was level. "Do you know the story of Vasilisa the Wise?" Krelthune blinked. Is that a Terran general? No, said Faye, her voice like falling snow. Just a girl who outwitted death with kindness and bone dust. Just a story. She smiled then, soft and wide. But stories are how humans teach memory. And some memories don't die. They just wait. Zelvix leaned back, unsettled. Juno tilted her head. Do you know what happens when you take a witch's children? No one answered. She whispered, you wake her up. The Empire's bureaucracy was swift, but not swift enough. Within hours, reports started filtering in from back channels and satellite relays. An unregistered Terran ghost signature had been detected near Sector D91. A string of listening posts were no longer responding. One station's last transmission had been, she's not dead. She's making tea. By the time those words reached the right ears, it was already too late. Back on the surface of Outpost Ren 12, in the cabin with the creaking porch and the rust-stained kettle, something stirred. A hand, long, thin, and steady, reached into the hearth and pulled out a charm wrapped in hair and copper wire. It pulsed red. Smoke whispered up the chimney. In the back room, maps lined the walls. Galactic routes. Alien biology. Weaknesses annotated in perfect script. Outside, the corn rustled, without wind. And inside, the mother of the girls, long thought dead by all who knew her name, opened her eyes and said just one word. Idiots. On the Empire ship, things began to go wrong in small, polite ways. Lights dimmed. Doorways flickered. The translation software misinterpreted a phrase and replaced compliance with reckoning. Zelvix fumbled with his pad. This isn't supposed to happen. They're low-tech. Their ship was cobbled from pre-fusion parts and kitchen scraps. Faye rested her chin on her hand. You've read about Terran war history? Of course, Krelthun said, waving a hand. Brutal. Short-lived. You burned your own sky. Juno's voice was soft. We built monsters you couldn't imagine. Then we buried them. Not because we couldn't win, because we wanted to forget what we were capable of. Faye added. But some of us remember. Zelvix looked up sharply. Who? Kala leaned forward. You didn't take 3 girls. Silence. You took the daughters of the Baba, Yaga. The air went still. Korn's hand hovered near his weapon. Krelthun scoffed, but it sounded thin now. That's a ghost story. Faye smiled gently. So was Hiroshima once. The hallway lights went black. A humming started from deep within the ship, an old melody half forgotten, full of sorrow and wrath. A Russian lullaby from before the Earth had satellites. Zelvix's datapad sparked and died. Faye rose slowly. She's coming. Who? Korn demanded. Kala's voice was calm. Our mother. Far across the stars, past the mines of Pharos 7, past the trading hubs of Yexari Drift, a name flickered into every comm system that had once classified her as deceased. Ali Baba Yaga, code black. Not dead. Not gone. Awake. And on the Empire ship, as the emergency klaxons began to wail, as data systems collapsed into static, and as 3 very calm girls watched the chaos begin, one final message arrived through a private channel. Silent, simple, and unmistakable. A voice. A whisper. Bring them back. And then the engine stopped. The interrogation room was round. Sterile. Without edges, without shadows, without mercy. 3 chairs sat under a halo of false light, one slightly taller than the others, as if it had a sense of self-importance. Faye took that one. She crossed her legs, adjusted the hem of her homespun skirt, and rested her elbows on the polished table like she was hosting guests for brunch. Juno slouched beside her, twirling a piece of her own hair like it was a blade of grass. Her bare feet were tucked beneath her, dusty and unbothered. She yawned with theatrical laziness, then stared up at the ceiling. Kala sat perfectly still, both hands folded neatly on the table. Her freckles looked like constellations. Her eyes didn't blink nearly as often as they should have. The room observed them. Beyond the mirror wall, the observers observed too. Are they drugged? Zelvix whispered, his voice high-pitched with unease. His long fingers tapped rapid calculations into a trembling datapad. Not possible, snapped Korn. They were scanned. Baseline humans. Low threat index. And yet they're not afraid. Krell stepped closer to the glass. His expression was curious now, less smug than before, more wary. They think they're still in control. They don't think, muttered Zelvix. They know. In the room, the girls waited, calmly, until the door hissed open and the light dimmed half a lumen. Krell entered with a flourish, flanked by Korn's imposing silhouette. Zelvix followed reluctantly, clutching his pad like a life preserver. Ladies, Krell said, smoothing his robe. I apologize for the delay. Galactic regulations. We do hope your accommodations were minimally traumatic. Faye smiled. We liked the wallpaper. Very prison chic. We don't use torture, he said quickly. Of course you do, Juno replied. You just renamed it something with a lot more syllables. Krell coughed. Interrogative recalibration therapy. There it is, Juno grinned. Kala leaned forward. What do you want to know? Zelvix opened his mouth, but Krell gestured for silence. Let me be plain, he said, folding his hands. We have questions about your maternal origin. Faye's brow lifted. I didn't realize the Empire did family therapy. Korn grunted. Answer the question. Kala tilted her head. Which question? Is your mother alive? Yes. Is she active? Yes. Zelvix stiffened. Impossible. She was declared deceased in the Yazari Rift conflict. Vaporized in an orbital collapse. That's the problem with declarations, Faye said softly. They're just wishes dressed as facts. Krell frowned. Are you saying the Baba Yaga of Earth is still operational? Kala smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Not just operational. She's awake. The interrogation lights dimmed briefly. No reason, no command. Just obedience. Zelvix's datapad flickered. There's something wrong with the ship system. AI stammered. Repeating a word. Boiling. Korn raised a brow. That's not a command protocol. It's not a command, Kala murmured. It's a warning. The girls exchanged a glance. One heartbeat shared in silence. Faye whispered, she's steeping. Zelvix stammered, steeping. Like tea, Juno said helpfully. You don't rush the flavor. You let the leaves bleed a bit. Simmer in the dark. Human metaphor, Zelvix hissed to his recorder. Aggressively non-literal. Untranslatable context. Krell paced slowly. This entire ordeal is a mistake. Faye leaned back. It wasn't your mistake. You're just the messenger. Krell paused. Whose mistake was it then? Kala's eyes narrowed. The Empire's. Elsewhere aboard the ship, a technician screamed. Just once. Long and sharp, and then gone. When they checked the security feed, it played backwards, then looped. The technician's face had been erased. No damage. Just smooth skin. Blank. Peaceful. A tea kettle whistle played over the speakers for 2.3 seconds before vanishing. The AI didn't log it. Back in the room, Korn's fingers twitched toward his weapon. This is psychological warfare. Yes, said Faye. And you're not winning. Krell lowered his voice. Tell me what she wants. She doesn't want, Kala said gently. She remembers. Zelvix interjected. Record state she retired. She chose seclusion. Agreed to exile in exchange for silence. Humans lie, Juno replied, grinning. Even in treaties. She has no reason to retaliate, Krell said, almost pleading. Kala's voice dropped. You took her children. A silence fell. Not a natural silence, but one with weight. With intention. Faye placed her palms on the table. We don't blame you for not knowing. Not really. She was a ghost. You probably thought we were just replacements. Or maybe you assumed she got soft with age. That she left her claws in the soil and faded. Juno chuckled. But we were raised for this. You mean trained, Zelvix said nervously. Trained is so institutional, Kala replied. We were nurtured. A screen blinked on. Footage appeared. Outside. Grainy. The cabin. The field. The dog barking. And then, her. Not a monster. Not a soldier. Just a woman in a cloak, stirring a pot over flame. Her hair silvered, but her back unbent. She turned toward the screen, eyes pale and glowing softly. The ship's systems jolted. The lights dimmed again. The screen went black. Then 4 words, in Terran Cyrillic, scrawled across every interface on the ship. Do not steal daughters. Zelvix dropped his pad. It's an illusion, he whispered. It's manipulation. Fear protocol. Designed to destabilize. Kala's voice sliced through him. She tore through 3 systems, once because a trade envoy insulted her soup. That's not in the archives. She kept it off record. Faye nodded. She always said, the deadliest wars are the ones no one remembers. Krelthun turned pale. This is a declaration, then. A statement of war. No, said Kala, rising slowly to her feet. This is not a declaration. Faye stood beside her. This is tea time. Juno smiled wide, eyes bright and wild. And with the biscuits. In the command bridge, alarms triggered without cause. Fleet communications jammed. One by one, the Empire's nearby ships went silent. A merchant vessel exploded in low orbit. No weapon discharge. Just ceased to exist. Sensors couldn't explain it. The data evaporated mid-transmission. The fleet's AI requested assistance from Earth and was denied. Quarn pulled his weapon. Faye didn't flinch. You won't need that. You're prisoners. Kala stepped forward. We were never yours. Zelvix backed away. You're bluffing. She's one woman, one myth. You can't destroy an empire with tea and storytelling. Can't we? Faye asked softly. The door hissed open. Not violently. Politely. With grace. The kind of opening a host offers to an expected guest. And through it walked a cup. Just a cup. Steam curling from within. Resting on a floating silver tray. No one had brought it in. No one knew where it came from. But it bore a note. 3 words. Neat handwriting. Sip. With. Care. Krelthun's voice cracked. What does she want? Kala turned. She stared through the glass. Through the ship. Through light years. She wants you to remember. Remember what? Juno answered. That humans don't forgive. Faye added. And witches don't die. The lights flickered one final time. And the sound of a kettle whistling echoed through the room again. This time louder. As if it were just on the other side of the wall. The story of Baba Yaga was not in the Empire's archives. Not in the Council's security briefings. Not in Zelvix's databanks. Not in the digitized cultural indexes they plundered from 100 conquered species. But it lived. It lived in whispers passed between exiled Terran engineers and ex-soldiers drunk on asteroid bars. In the silent prayers of diplomatic envoys who once watched an entire moon vanish without blast or warning. It lived in old Earth nursery rhymes buried beneath algorithms, encrypted under names like Program YG-13 or the Forest Protocol. But it wasn't a protocol. It was a promise. And across the Empire, one by one, people were starting to remember. The first to die was a whisperer, a creature from Xinok 4 who'd been caught bragging about Earth's surrender a century ago. His lungs filled with boiling milk and teeth. No sign of how. No trace. Just gone. And in his place, carved gently into the table he'd sat at, politeness costs nothing. The second was a high strategist who'd requested the girls be dissected for research. He laughed over the comms, made snide jokes about primitive Terran fertility, then turned to find his personal guard missing and his favorite chair filled with a woman stirring tea. They never found his body, but they found a copy of Hansel and Gretel on his desk. In Russian, Faye sat in the middle of the ship's meditation cell, hands folded neatly. She had asked for 5 minutes of quiet. The request had been granted out of habit. No one had denied her anything since the first tea tray appeared. She didn't pray. She didn't hum. She didn't threaten. She simply waited. Juno paced outside, barefoot as always, leaving smudged outlines of her toes on the glass floor. She was humming something now, an old Earth melody that didn't translate through the comms. Zelvix had tried to capture it with his audio tools, but they kept crashing when her voice hit a certain pitch. He'd started twitching on the second attempt. Kala had vanished from the cells entirely. No one remembered authorizing it. She wasn't showing up on internal scans, but occasionally someone saw a braid flicker past in the hallway reflection, or heard the faint creak of wooden floorboards where there were none. The ship had developed cold spots. No one was laughing anymore. Aboard the Imperial flagship Vexorius, the High Council convened. Holograms flickered as leaders of 29 species gathered in fractal geometry, each appearing in their native form. One jelly-based monarch shimmered in panic. Another, a winged matriarch from the Starborn line, kept mumbling, "She's not supposed to exist." The supreme overseer of Sector Theta 9, a three-lobed mass of intelligence named Score, floated forward. "This cannot be verified. Baba Yaga is a Terran myth, a deterrent construct." "Then explain," hissed a Grek admiral, "why 5 deep space mines went silent after her name appeared in their soil, carved in the ore, glowing red." "There is no logic in fear," said Score. "But there is logic in patterns," whispered a small voice. It came from a former human diplomat, old and tired, long forgotten in the Empire's hierarchy. She leaned forward, her gaze clear. "You let her retire. You let her raise daughters." Someone laughed nervously. "Daughters? What harm could?" "They weren't daughters," the diplomat said. "They were seeds." On the galactic trade hub of Iskaprime, all 3 sisters walked calmly through the market district in borrowed uniforms. They weren't supposed to be there. No one had released them. No record of transport. But they walked with the confidence of ghosts and the precision of war machines. Juno smiled at a vendor, complimented his boots, and moments later his security drone imploded mid-air without a sound. She handed him a chocolate and said, "Run." He did. Calla slipped through the communication tower, laying her fingers gently on conduits, whispering in a language older than any computer. Lights blinked. Systems faltered. Data melted. Faye arrived at the central broadcast terminal. She didn't hack it. She just sat down at the operator's chair. The seat adjusted to her height automatically, as if it remembered her. She leaned forward and pressed one button. Every screen in the Empire shimmered. A soft, flickering fire. Then her voice. "Let me tell you a story." They listened. Because they couldn't look away. Because their systems wouldn't let them. Because somewhere deep in the synthetic bones of their machines, a command had been planted centuries ago. Hidden in old Earth stories, embedded in children's songs, woven into the DNA of databases that had once cataloged Sleeping Beauty and Rumpelstiltskin. The command was simple. If a witch speaks, listen. So they listened. Fate told them about a mother who brewed tea stronger than poison and spoke softly while assassinating kings. She told them about a cabin that walked on chicken legs, a laugh that melted armor, a shadow that fed on dread. She told them of Baba Yaga, and how she had been waiting. Back on the Empire ship, chaos whispered louder. Power grids began failing, but only to systems related to containment. Lights flickered only in rooms where commanders gathered. Doors sealed or opened without authorization, always just when someone was reaching for a weapon or speaking the word threat. The crew began seeing her, not on cameras, in reflections, in corners, in dreams. One lieutenant begged to be released, claiming his own mother had appeared in his quarters, offering him gingerbread and asking where the daughters had gone. He was not believed, until his skin turned to bark and his voice to wind. Zelvik snapped. He burst into the meditation cell, datapad flickering wildly, eyes bloodshot, and screamed, "What are you?" Faye looked up from her tea. "Hospitable. You're humans. You're not gods. He broke off, shaking. "I never said we were gods." She sipped. "But you're not used to being prey, are you?" He staggered back. "Let me guess," she continued. "Your kind believes power lies in force, in weapons, in numbers. You think the sharpest blade wins the war." She stood. "But humans learned long ago that the sharpest blade is the story." She took a step forward. "And we write ours in blood after the ending." The Empire's homeworld began to glitch. Not explode. Not burn. Glitch. One moment, its oceans were blue. The next red. Then gone. Then back. Buildings blinked in and out of reality. Children hummed unfamiliar lullabies. Broadcasts were replaced with flickers of shadow puppets dancing in firelight. And above the planet, a ship emerged. Old, rusting, silent. A ghost ship. Its name flared across every sensor at once, though it bore no letters. Rasputin. And aboard it, barefoot, stirring a kettle in a kitchen lined with knives, was the mother. The Baba Yaga. She spoke no words. She didn't need to. Inside the Empire's deepest vault, a weapon once sealed away by a now-dead emperor came online without command. A planetary erasure device, powered by gravitational singularities. It armed itself, then turned, not toward Earth, but toward the Empire's own fleet. Faye's voice echoed through every vessel. You stole from a woman who builds forests from bones and legends from loss. You thought you could burn the old gods and bury the witches. But stories grow in dirt, and we've had 100 years to root. She paused. You didn't start a war. You woke up something older than fear. The girls stepped back from the control room, hands clean. No alarm screamed. No shots fired. The only sound was the soft creak of a rocking chair, far away. And then a voice. Her voice. Not loud. Not angry. Just present. Bring my daughters home. And in every fleet, every ship, every planetary base, the engines shut down. The Empire's heart stilled. Not from war. Not from invasion. Not from a calculated fleet-wide strike. But from silence. Across the 12 core worlds, machinery whispered to a halt. Cities blinked and held their breath. Artificial moons flickered and dimmed. The central mind, an intelligence bred from 7 millennia of alien brilliance, locked itself into recursive paralysis. One simple command looping through its every circuit. Bring my daughters home. Rasputin drifted just beyond the orbital perimeter of the Empire's throne world, cloaked in time-dampening shields and hull plating designed long before fusion drives ever touched space. It did not announce itself. It didn't have to. The Empire had stopped listening to reason. It had started listening to stories. Inside the ship, the kettle whistled. Steam curled like incense in the dimly lit galley. The light bulbs hummed faintly, not from power strain, but from effort, as if they, too, were holding their breath. A narrow table stood at the center, its wood older than most of the stars outside. Knotted pine, stained by memory. A loaf of black bread rested on a ceramic plate. A bone-handled knife beside it. 3 cups, porcelain, chipped, human, waited for hands. And Baba Yaga stirred her tea. She was not armored. She was not armed. Her robe was patched, the color of soot and frost. Her feet were bare. Her gray braid touched her waist. But her eyes burned, not with wrath, but with something older, something less forgiving, something human. Behind her, the door opened with a soft click. The 3 girls entered without words. Kala took the seat on the left, Juno the right. Faye paused beside their mother, resting her fingers lightly against her shoulder before sitting across. They didn't ask what came next. They knew. Are you ready? Baba Yaga asked. Her voice had the timbre of dried leaves brushing stone, of wind curling through a broken window in winter. Kala nodded once. Her hands were steady. Juno cracked her knuckles. Her grin was quieter now. Faye folded her fingers in her lap. The Empire doesn't know it's already dead. Baba Yaga looked at each of them in turn. Let's show them what grief tastes like. And she poured the tea. Above the Empire's throne world, Rasputin began to move. It didn't fly. It danced. Its engines didn't roar. They pulsed like a heartbeat. With every flicker of its thrusters, it wove between orbital mines, slipped past security fields that hadn't existed when it was built, and sang old Earth melodies in tones no alien sensors could track. To the Imperial satellites, it was a memory. To the watchers below, it was folklore arriving late for dinner. Inside the palace, panic spread like ink and water. The council no longer convened. The AI had sealed their chamber, walls grown flush with bone and moss, courtesy of an algorithm that had rewritten itself with forest logic. The guards at the perimeter stood silent, unmoving, eyes glossy and unblinking. Some were still breathing. Some were not. In the central hall, the Emperor of the Galactic Axis, Veilcore, stood alone before a mirror that no longer reflected him. His lips parted. "What do you want?" And from the mirror, the voice replied, not in code, not in alien tongue, but in human. "A meal, a memory, a reckoning." He stumbled back as the glass cracked once, just once, spiderwebbing across 1,000 years of power. Rasputin descended like a leaf, not a blade. It touched down on the black marble of the Imperial spire with such gentleness that the landing crew never activated defenses. They watched. They trembled. One dropped to his knees and began whispering earth prayers he'd heard once from a Terran slave who died smiling. The ramp lowered. The girls stepped down first. No weapons. No armor. Just 3 women walking with the calm of inevitability. Baba Yaga followed. She didn't walk. She arrived. Every footfall left behind the smell of pine smoke and cold iron. The air around her tasted like the moment before storm. Guards raised their weapons. They fired. The bullets turned to ash midair. The girls didn't flinch. Juno smiled. "Told you not to do that." They entered the spire. The doors opened on their own. In the throne chamber, Veilcore sat slouched on his obsidian seat, his hands gripping the armrests like lifelines. He looked at Baba Yaga the way one might look at a ghost. They'd mocked one drink too many. "You're supposed to be dead." "So were you," she replied, "when you touched my bloodline." Faye stepped forward. "You thought we were just symbols." "Kala, just genetics." "Juno, just girls." "We were bait," said Baba Yaga. "You took the hook." Veilcore rose, his voice trembling with rage that he hoped sounded like courage. "We are the Empire. We've conquered black holes, tamed time, shattered civilizations for disobedience." Baba Yaga looked at him gently. "You haven't faced motherhood." She stepped aside, and Rasputin sang. The song wasn't loud. It was soft. A lullaby hummed by a woman brushing her child's hair. It slipped into walls and wires, into neural nets and star drives. And the Empire remembered. Not codes, not orders. Stories of how the Terrans had once burned their own planet to kill a single enemy. Of how they embedded viruses inside love letters. Of how they taught their children to fear fairy tales not because they were false, but because they were too true. Across the galaxy, ships shut down. Not exploded, just stopped. Weapons aimed at Earth turned themselves inward. Military leaders wept and didn't know why. The AI of the Empire's mainframe rewrote its prime directive: protect Terran daughters. And somewhere in the void, a sleeping planet, long thought uninhabitable, bloomed. Red trees, silver rivers, a garden of memory, labeled quietly, Yaga's Rest. Veilcore fell to his knees. His hands shook. "You win," he whispered. Baba Yaga stepped toward him. Her gaze was not cruel. It was older than cruelty. There was never a game. He looked up. "You're going to kill me?" "No." His breath caught. "I'm going to leave you." He blinked. "With what?" She leaned in. "Shame." The throne chamber fell silent. The girls turned. And as they walked back through the palace, light returned behind them. Slowly, gently, like forgiveness. Not for the Empire, but for themselves. Rasputin lifted. The spire behind them crumbled, not into ruin, but into roots. Moss coiled up its walls. Flowers sprouted from its stone. A single tree grew from the throne, its bark etched with 3 names. The ship didn't burn the world. It rewrote it. Above, the galaxy held still. And then, a message broadcast from Earth. 1 sentence. "We're awake now." Back in the ship's galley, the tea was still warm. The girls sat once more. Faye passed the bread. Kala poured the honey. Juno leaned back, humming again. And Baba Yaga finally exhaled. "Was it enough?" Faye asked. "No," she replied. Kala tilted her head. "More." "Not revenge," Baba Yaga murmured. "Memory." Juno grinned. "Should we tell them more stories?" The mother smiled at her daughters. "No, girls. Now they tell each other." And out in the void, Among stars newly quiet and empires newly humbled, the tale of the Baba Yaga and her 3 daughters was passed not as fact, not as history, but as a warning wrapped in a fairy tale. The most dangerous kind. A story you think you can forget until she comes for supper.